For the employees working at online shoe seller Zappos, they were living the dream. On top of great pay and benefits, working was fun. They could be themselves. Work felt like a playground. CEO Tony Hsieh, who had written a book on happiness at work, had implemented a holacracy, which meant there were no bosses. And it was working. Zappos had the kind of elusive hockey stick growth that other companies only dreamed of, and Tony was a shining example of a CEO who could make everybody happy: employees, customers, and shareholders. And now he was on a nationwide bus tour with a dozen friends and coworkers to spread the Zappos gospel. Underneath the surface, however, was a different reality altogether. Though the bus was wrapped with the phrase, delivering happiness, its passengers were cracking. The truth was, Tony was psychologically and physically breaking down, exacerbated by heavy drinking and drug use. He was maniacal, pressuring coworkers to drink excessively with him while he pontificated on nonsensical ideas about life and business. 5 years after his tragic death, we can pinpoint this moment as the beginning of a decades-long nosedive into the depths of addiction, eventually fueled by ketamine and nitrous oxide. But for the people on that bus, though his behavior was certainly odd, it was just Tony being Tony. He was the CEO of a successful company. He was worth almost $1 billion. Who were they to tell him his behavior was wrong? Plus, he was bankrolling their lives. They had a vested interest in keeping him on their good side. Certainly, eventually, Tony would hit rock bottom and get himself help, right? The problem with being super rich is that there often is no rock bottom. No one abandons you, no one cuts you off, and no one tells you no. Which meant for Tony, being rich was a death sentence. This is the Corporate Gossip Podcast. Zappos and Tony Hsieh, the dark side of happiness.
I woke up this morning at 7 p.m.
Welcome back to the Corporate Gossip Podcast. If you want to see Adam slide into the studio and break the couch that he was sitting on just a couple minutes ago, skip to the end of the episode, laugh, giggle, then come back and join us now in real time.
Mm-hmm. It's a little treat.
Couple notes before we get started. If you want to skip this, just go to the show notes. Go to the timestamps. They are your friend. So this is our last episode of season 6. It's time for our biannual research break. We will be back in the new year with more CEO shenanigans and business buffoonery. But if you can't bear the thought of not hearing us for the next month or so, don't worry. For as little as $5 a month, you can join all the fun people over on Patreon where you get new episodes every other week. Over there, we do hot topics and newsworthy deep dives. And while we're on break, you're going to get supersized Patreon bonus episodes. And of course, the Patreon is the thing that keeps this indie show on the road, along with our listener advertisers. And of course, if you want to advertise on the next season of the Corporate Gossip Podcast, it is truly very easy. All you have to do is click the link in our show notes. And I will note that we don't do dynamic ads, which means your advertisement lives on the podcast forever. And so as new people find the show, you're always going to have new people listening to your ads on her back catalog.
So what you're saying is you can get in at the ground floor.
Really get in on the ground level. And that I will
like
say,
any good multi-level marketing.
It's something that very few podcasts do. Most podcasts that you would advertise on, they have dynamic ads. So there's like a cap, but we don't do that. For this episode, we read the compelling, emotional, tremendously well-reported book called Wonder Boy by Angel Au Young and David Jeans. There is another book out there about Tony Hsieh, and I'll put both of them in the show notes. But this book in particular is going to be the subject of our first online corporate gossip book club this Sunday. So if you are listening to this episode when it comes out on Friday, November, I think it's 21st. Yep, Friday, November 21st. The book club is on Sunday, November 23rd at 2 p.m. And if you want more details on that, you can head over to our Patreon. That's available. You can join the book club at the Murdoch's Mates level. Most importantly, thank you for being a listener to another season of the Corporate Gossip Podcast. We are so happy that you choose to spend somewhere between 60 and 90 minutes with us every other week. We always aim to make it worth your time. So hopefully you learn a little bit, but most importantly, you have fun and you come away from this podcast remembering that you are smarter than a CEO. Now for the episode. Trigger warning, we're going to talk about drug and alcohol abuse, overdose, and suicide. So please listen with care. So with that said, welcome to the Corporate Gossip Podcast. I'm your host, CPA Scorned, Becca Platsky. Happy to be with you. And I'm here with my brother and my co-host,
Data Analytics Playboy Adam Platsky, or the Smart Glenn Powell.
Oh, the Smart Glenn Powell.
Smart
Interesting.
Glenn Powell.
Okay. Well, let's see how that lands.
Well, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my new look.
That's true. He's sporting a new fashionable look with loafers. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Zappos, but then the rest of the episode, we're going to put Tony into the Zappos story and spend the rest of the time talking about his story. Zappos, it still technically exists. You can go to their website, but it's largely at this point been dismantled by Amazon. They bought the company in 2008, which was at the time an early footwear e-commerce company. It originated about 8 months after the dot-com bubble burst. And despite early financial calamity, they were able to grow and thrive. It was founded by Nick Swimmern, and Tony Hsieh was an early investor who eventually became co-CEO. And I mean, he was really the face of the company. VC money starts pouring in. They're incredibly commercially successful. I bought shoes on Zappos. I remember their customer service being excellent. Remember, I mean, that's important, especially in the 2000s. People are still just starting to buy things online. They weren't fully bought into the concept. So the fact that you could pick up the phone, you could talk to somebody, you know, that sounded like your neighbor and do an easy return if you needed it, that was like all part of their
Free return.
Free return. And I mean, their customer service was famously like heads and shoulders above the rest.
If we remember around that time, people were buying things online, but they weren't necessarily buying sneakers. So what Tony did was say, hey, I'm going to remove this barrier of entry to buy sneakers. I'm going to offer free returns and great free shipping, free returns, and great customer service. Really, he was the first guy in the space to think of free shipping. There was no free shipping. Amazon didn't have free shipping prior to that. They adopted that.
Here's a clip that I think kind of shows what kind of customer service that Zappos is famous for.
And while many companies cut costs by outsourcing their call center overseas, Zappos Center is in Las Vegas, where the operators are all members of something called the Customer Loyalty Team.
You're very welcome, Monica. Have a great day.
We view our call center as a branding opportunity. Every phone call is a branding opportunity.
Every operator is given discretion to do what it takes to make a customer happy.
Do you remember which actress in this movie had the boots?
Another operator patiently worked with a customer trying to find a pair of boots she saw in a Lifetime television movie.
Is it on YouTube? Cries in the dark. I'll watch it. I'll watch it with you, and we're going to find something out here.
And it worked, right? I mean, hockey stick growth. This company just completely exploded. If you weren't a shareholder of Zappos, which at the time was a private company, the next best thing you could be would be an employee of Zappos. I want to get into the workplace cult that was Zappos Henderson, Nevada headquarters. I don't use cult to like diminish the Zappos culture. I mean, for me, as a 20-year-old college student, when Tony's book came out, I was like, sign me up. But I do think it's worth exploring a little bit, especially given what we know now in hindsight. So you ready for corporate gossip number one? Corporate gossip number one is 2 words, ball pit.
Spider-Man in the cafeteria. Go! Racing toy cars in the middle of the office. What's going on here?
Welcome to the zoo.
What you are witnessing is a social experiment by Tony Hsieh, the entrepreneur and mastermind behind Zappos, the online shoe company. His revolutionary way of running a business has made Zappos into a $1.2 billion powerhouse, And he got there with the guiding principle: great things will happen if you make employees happy. It's like a playground. I mean, there are balloons, there are whistles. Does that help business?
We think it's important for employees to have fun, and that drives employee engagement. And companies with strong cultures tend to outperform the ones that don't have strong cultures.
For me, I'm like, take me to Southwest in 1992. Take me to Turner Broadcasting in 1980. Take me to Zappos in the early 10s. I want a silly hat. I want kombucha on tap. I want a sign that says bring your weird to work. Tony really created a one-of-a-kind culture at Zappos. He implemented a somewhat novel, though highly criticized, managerial concept called holacracy. Holacracy? Holacracy? Holacracy sounds wrong. But at Zappos, this is from NPR. Holacracy is based on a term and a concept coined by anti-totalitarian political writer. Its central tenets include individual autonomy, self-governance. In a holacracy, employees aren't told how to work. Instead, they belong to voluntary groups called circles. Everyone has an equal say, and employees are evaluated and rewarded by peers instead of by a boss. And, you might hear this and think of it as like a relic of Obama-era tech optimism and rag on it, call it inefficient, whatever. I don't think you'd be surprised to hear me say that, I think it's fun when businesses are weird and inefficient. I think the consolidation of efficiencies and operational synergies that have been ham-handedly implemented across American corporations over the past decade or so, we've kind of lost the spirit of businesses are just really little communities of a bunch of people, and they're a reflection of those people. And I think when they're financially viable, when you're operating from a business model that works like Zappos did, you can be weird. You can be inefficient. Try a holacracy. See how it works. We've lost a lot of that fun that I think made Zappos a really attractive place to work, but now I think is not really tolerated in the American workplace, especially when it comes to public companies or companies that are getting VC money. These companies that I mentioned, Southwest, Turner Broadcasting, Zappos, they have these really unique corporate culture, and sometimes it veers into cult. It's really only possible to do that and not have a tremendous amount of pushback if you have a singular, unconventional leader, like those companies do, who already have buy-in from both the shareholders and the street, right? Which Tony had. I mean, again, hockey stick growth, no one's going to push back on that. Employees seem happy. You got great customer service. You're getting tons of earned media because of how good your customer service people are. You're paying them well. No one's going to be upset about that, right? And again, this is pre-recession, so things are still looking pretty good. Employees have this incredible experience, right? Every business journalist or MBA journal is calling Tony and wanting to get a quote for a story about they're doing about corporate culture. He's speaking all over the world. Everybody's telling him what a genius he is. And on top of that, Zappos is doing gangbusters. And in 2009, Amazon buys Zappos for $1.2 billion, which puts Tony well on his way to being a billionaire. It's hard to imagine now, but Amazon at the time also had a reputation for being a good place to work. Bezos still had a good chunk of brain matter left. This is really... I always like to look back at Jeff Bezos's glow down.
That's back when he was reading.
Yeah, that's back when he read books and had a little bit of hair left. So here's a picture of Tony at Microsoft headquarters with executives from eBay, Overstock, Barnes & Noble, and of course, Microsoft and Bill Gates, right? Tony looks very out of place in this picture. He's the only one wearing jeans. He's also the only person of color. There's one other woman there.
Put the woman and the person of color all the way to the left.
You're so right. They're standing off to the side.
Yeah.
Tony and the woman are standing off to the
there's
side.
so much, all the white men are so much closer. Look at them.
That's such a good observation that I didn't even make. One colleague at Zappos said he had broken through the bamboo ceiling. So I think to be leading a startup that can hang with the big boys and still maintain its quirky culture and keep the shareholders happy, that's no small feat. And I think for most people, they would be very satisfied with what they had accomplished, especially at such a young age. Tony at this point is like in his early 30s when it's sold to Amazon. But Tony, as we'll learn, is not most people. Corporate gossip number 2 is,
I want to go to college for the rest of my life.
let's go back and really understand Tony's backstory. So he's the oldest son of Taiwanese immigrants, Richard and Judy Hsieh. He's got 2 younger brothers, Andy and Dave. His parents moved the family from Urbana, Illinois to California when Tony's 5. He's like the typical future CEO. He's making little businesses with his brothers. He's very high achieving. He's most likely to succeed. His friends say he cries when he gets anything less than an A. His parents make him practice 4 different instruments for 2 hours a day each during the weekdays. And then on the weekends and during the summer, he has to practice them for 4 hours a day. He ends up skipping a grade, and a few things start to bubble up to the surface when you look at Tony's childhood. The first is feeling different and feeling singled out. Not only is he one of the only Asian kids in his class, but he's also skipped a grade, and now he's smaller than the other boys in the class. Adam, I'm wondering if you can shine some light on like how that in particular can, what that feels like and how that shows up like even later in life.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I hit a growth spurt later in school, and a lot of my friends were much taller than me, and it sets you aside. And on top of that, I was an anxious kid, so I already felt very different. And where we grew up, there certainly weren't a ton of Jewish kids, so being Jewish separates you further. So being separated is just it's challenging. Feeling like the odd man out, and then other people calling that out makes you very insecure, and I can identify with that.
Yeah, I think at this point I think you talk about the insecurity. I think that that's something that is a trend throughout Tony's life and ends up becoming more apparent, is like feeling insecure, feeling unsure about your place in the world and like your worth, feeling included with a friend group. He really struggles with that. And so after high school, he ends up getting accepted into every Ivy League college you can think of, and he ends up at Harvard. At Harvard, he really loves to throw parties. It's not that he's a big drinker, but he just loves having the dorm room where everybody wants to come hang out. He's very sentimental about his friendships in college. Like, he's writing everybody these really sweet letters, and he kind of finally feels like he's accepted, which he didn't feel like earlier in his life. A high school friend said Tony felt some desire for inclusion. He was always very eager to have people happy when they were with him. So he leaves college. He founds this early internet company called Link Exchange, and then a venture called Venture Frogs. And he's always trying to recreate kind of that Harvard dorm room. And like, this is a trend we've seen. We were just talking about it in the Activision Blizzard. Like, a lot of people yearn to recreate college for themselves in adulthood. I totally get it. We've seen it in SBF too. I think that's another episode where that comes up. I mean, with friends all around, and it's always a party, and you're meeting new people. Like, that to him, we're going to see it again and again. Like, he just is constantly trying to make sure that he's never alone. He seems really self-conscious. Despite his success, when he's at Link Exchange, he's still really uncomfortable with public speaking. After every meeting, he like pulls colleagues aside and he's like, was that okay? Like, do I need to do anything differently? Like, there are so many times during this book and in this research where my heart just breaks for Tony, because I can just tell like he's just a sweet guy who wants everybody to like him.
Yeah.
Isn't that so? It's so relatable.
The other interesting thread here is you'll notice he wants to be surrounded by people.
Mm-hmm.
He yearns for human connection.
Totally.
Which is completely different from where the story ends. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Tony is very giving. There are periods throughout his life, especially as he's making more money, that he ends up selling Link Exchange, makes $32 million by the time he's 25 years old. He's putting up multiple friends and family members in various apartments that he owns or rents. Once he sells Link Exchange, he takes all of his friends on a cruise. And he's kind of self-reflective too. He says to a childhood friend, if you hate somebody, give them a winning lottery ticket and announce it to the world. Having so much financial success in your 20s and 30s comes with a different set of challenges than most people will ever have to face. That's pretty profound for a 25-year-old kid who just sold their business. I think a lot of Forbes 30 under 30 would not have that feeling, you know? You just don't have the mental capacity to handle that much money and power when you're in your 20s. That's like the curse of Justin Bieber. You know, no kid before their frontal lobe is developed should have $32 million. They're much more likely to get taken advantage of or self-destruct. Most people would describe Tony as a people pleaser. One friend describes him as the giving tree, which I think is really apt. Let's touch down on this. I want to talk about people pleasing, which it's not just like saying yes to a friend when they want to go out and you're tired, or, you know, going above and beyond for your boss. The level of people pleasing that I think Tony suffered from is closer to like a personality disorder. I went on Psychology Today and I kind of did some research on people pleasing. Traits of like a pathological people pleaser can include low self-worth, accommodates everybody else's needs, undermine their own needs, feels valuable when complying with others, values praise from others. They want to be recognized and accepted by everybody. For the most part, if they feel well liked, they can relax and like themselves as well. I mean, the thing that I think about this is like, what a demanding way to live your life. And it might not surprise you that like some people pleasers end up turning to drugs and alcohol for escape. A quick note before we run this ad, our ad schedule is finalized before we determine the order of episodes for the season. Any similarity between episode content and ad content is purely coincidental. Your success in business has brought you everything except peace of mind because you have a son, daughter, or family member with a mental illness or addiction. You've watched them struggle for years, and instead of getting better, the situation keeps getting worse. You know you have to do something, but you just don't know where to begin. Mark Cantor and his team of trained professionals at New York Intervention have been helping high-profile families like yours find lasting solutions for over a decade. They have the expertise and experience to guide you through the most complex situations involving addictive behaviors, mental illness, and failure to launch cases. New York Intervention specializes in high-profile clients and provides crisis intervention, family and recovery coaching, treatment placement, and therapeutic counseling. For more information, visit newyorkinterventionist.com or text or call 212-671-2577 or click the link in our show notes. Ready for corporate gossip number 3? We're going to have some fun, okay? It's going to get really heavy. There's only a couple like light spots, but this is one of them. Corporate gossip number 3 is, I remember my first rave. Around 1999, right after he cashes his Link Exchange check, 26-year-old Tony discovers raves. Here's how he describes it. It was as if the existence of individual consciousness had disappeared and been replaced by a single unifying group consciousness, the same way a flock of birds might seem like a single entity instead of a collection of individual birds. Everyone in the warehouse has shared purpose. We're all contributors to the collective rave experience. Hell yeah, brother.
You like raves?
No, but I mean, I love a concert. You know, listen, like live music is pretty fucking powerful. Like, especially when people are on the same page.
I don't know. I have a limited capacity for like large events. I was just thinking about this today. I was like, man, I loved a house party, but with like 70 people.
Right.
And like a reasonably sized house. Any more compact and like it's shoulder to shoulder, that is not my jam. And that is not where I get down.
Yeah.
You know, I need space. I got to be able to explore a space.
Okay, fair enough. Yes, our dancing, as I will say, the Platsky genetic dancing code is very, it requires like a pretty good circumference because there's a lot of punching in the air, moving around in various ways. Yeah, I would agree with that.
If you like raves, you would like Burning Man, right?
Oh, he loved Burning Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, like, if you've never been to a rave, I've been to like maybe 2 raves in my life. And they were great. I totally understand like where he's coming from. It's like you can totally feel outside of yourself. It also helps when you're rolling. So he starts using MDMA the same year he goes to his first rave. So he's got this heightened sense of awareness, well-being, empathy, a rush of serotonin. He starts using acid as a way to explore who he is and like uncover past trauma. And this is when he starts building his first commune in the Bay Area. He buys 20% of the apartments in a building in Nob Hill. He purchases the penthouse unit of this apartment, 3,500 square feet, and he's like, this is going to be a club for me and all my friends to hang out in. He's like, I want this to be my own private version of Central Perk from Friends. Around this time is when, through Venture Frogs, he invests in Zappos and he becomes CEO. And at that point, he's really bringing the party to work, which was not uncommon in the Bay Area at the time. You know, his Bay Area peers are like the housewives. Every time one of them founds a company, they throw a huge party. Famously, Mark Benioff, when he founded Salesforce, they had 200 users. They were not making a profit, but he still spent tens of thousands of dollars to rent out the entire Regency Theater for a 2,000 person launch party for the business. That's what they did because, you know, these guys are fucking nerds and they don't get invited to the frat party when they were younger. And now they want to be the person standing in front of the door saying, sorry, you can't come. I get it. But back at the penthouse, Tony is spending $10,000 on alcohol a night. He's always paying for people's
$1,999?
Yes. I don't think that was adjusted for inflation. Wait, should we check and see?
It's probably not adjusted for inflation. That is $1,999.
So, it's $2,001. $18,549 on alcohol a night, adjusted for inflation. He's also got like 10 mortgages, and Zappos is financially struggling. They're strapped for cash. He ends up having to sell all of his real estate to keep the company afloat. And this is when they make the decision to kind of separate themselves from the competition by focusing on like that top-notch customer service that ultimately is going to make them successful. And they're like, we need to find somewhere to put our headquarters where hospitality is like the best in the world. And what better place to move the company's headquarters than Las Vegas, Nevada? All right, so off to Vegas. You ready for corporate gossip number 4?
Mm-hmm.
Tony's Sumner Redstone moment. It's always nice when we do these podcasts where we can kind of pull threads. We've talked about SBF. We've talked about Ted Turner and Herb Kelleher at Southwest, who, side note, I think Herb Kelleher at Southwest would have been a great mentor for Tony. Now we're going to talk about Sumner Redstone because you're going to start to see some similar themes. So the year that Zappos moves to Henderson, Nevada, which is about 20 minutes southeast of Vegas, they're generating upwards of $70 million in sales, and they're becoming famous for their customer service. Tony is obsessed with keeping employees happy. They're paying 100% of their healthcare premiums, which is like unheard of at the time.
Unheard of at the time, still unheard of.
I know. Yeah, you're right. Bringing in motivational speakers. They're like purpose-driven, passion-driven. They teach about positive psychology. Like they were on the forefront of the trend that I think kind of dominated the pre-pandemic workspace. Zappos does kind of hit a growth limit. Shareholders get antsy and then they sell to Amazon. And at this point, Tony is a household name. He's doing the speaker circuits. He's published Delivering Happiness. Everybody wants a piece of them. He starts on this book tour with the help of a couple personal assistants. Mimi Pham, who we're going to get into a little bit more in the after show, is one of them. Mimi plays a pretty big role in Tony's story. She's kind of like his consigliere. I mentioned that he didn't like conflict. So anytime there was an opportunity for her to deliver bad news, he would take it, right? It was kind of like Les Wexner with Jeffrey Epstein. He has somebody who's going to deliver bad news for him. She's the one who's also responsible for getting him drugs. She has access to his credit card. They share an address on their driver's license. A lot of people think that Mimi was using Tony and stealing money from him. Another one of his assistants remembers Mimi saying, "Tony is all I have." And there was a lot of similarities for me here between her and Sumner Redstone's girlfriends.
Oh, interesting. Did you gloss over the fact that Tony wrote Delivering Happiness while high and drunk on a like multiple day bender in Lake Tahoe?
No.
Oh. Yeah, I picked that up in
Yeah.
in one of the articles that we read, which was crazy to me. And it's a very, I mean, it's renowned book. It's got
Well, yeah, but he also did a lot of. If you go to the New York Times bestseller list, it definitely has a dagger, which means that they purchased a lot of those books when he was going on the tour. They would pre-purchase a lot of those books, so it might not have been as successful as you would have thought.
Got it.
Yeah,
But an interesting fact nonetheless.
Yeah.
This is how this person is working.
not surprising. Yes. It's not clear if Mimi is actually dating Tony. I think this might be a good time to touch down on his love life. I don't know. See if you could guess that this was the case. He was not monogamous. Quote, a monogamous guy would have fewer copies of his genes in the next generation than a guy who wasn't, he said. Like I said, there's like 3 ideas throwing around in Silicon Valley. That's one of them. He dated people from Zappos. He dated people that he worked with. It was pretty an open thing. Quote, to those inside the community at the time, the fact that Tony dated employees and was expressly open about being polyamorous seemed to allow most to overlook the questions that they had. Interestingly, there's like 1 or 2 women who get close to being in a relationship with him, like a real relationship, but he's never really able to commit to one person. And he's always kind of got his eye on somebody else, somebody new. Quote, a rotating cast of women ensured Tony was never alone. They also allowed him to spread himself a mile wide across relationships and an inch deep. Remember, you know who else did that? Ted Turner. With Jane Fonda. And she was like, I can't do this if you're constantly going to need to have a girlfriend when I'm not here. And he's like, I cannot be alone. So we're going to talk about the Delivering Happiness bus tour, which is basically Tony and a bunch of people getting on a bus, doing speaking engagements. We'll see them at South by Southwest. They're going all over the country trying to promote this book. The book tour was basically a booze cruise. The team is drinking and partying constantly. I have this picture of Ivanka Trump and Tony Hsieh. And right before this picture is taken, a PR girl who's traveling with them, she's trying to clean up the frame. And so she's taking Ivanka's purse and she's like, Tony, let me hold your drink. And so she goes to take it out of his hand, his glass of Fernet. And he's like not letting it go. And she's like, let me hold it. And somebody comes up to her afterwards and is like, you do not separate Tony from his drink. Here's a video of a reporter trying to understand what the Deliver Happiness bus tour is all about.
And basically we've been driving around and we've got a bartender on board and just we'll take a look. It's empty now because it's in the middle of the day and we don't really start drinking till 3 p.m. 4 p.m.
I think it was around like 1 o'clock people just started rolling in to the Driscoll last night.
So last night we had about I don't know if you can see, but we had about 50 people on this bus, so it was pretty crazy.
And where did you go last night? Were you?
I'm not even sure. We just went from I think we went to 6 or 7 different locations, just where the other parties were happening, and then we kind of had our party outside.
So a great way to deliver happiness to all the people here at South by Southwest, as well as share the knowledge about the book. So did you give a speech or anything about happiness? As people were getting on board, or was it just?
No, we were just handing out copies to friends, and and then the book comes out June 7th. So.
I love that the reporter's like, so you give speeches about the book on this bus? And he's like,
no, we just party, man. It's also interesting. So they're about to step on the bus and he's like, oh, I don't know. We, start drinking. What time? I don't know, 3 p.m. And it's just all about drinking. It's his entire personality is like, let's party.
Yeah.
There's nothing about delivering happiness.
No.
It is let's party. And I don't remember where we were last night.
Yeah.
Which is not the behavior you would expect of a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company.
No. Things are getting really tense on the bus because people are tired. They're hungover. They keep having to drive from city to city. People are fighting, but Tony won't intervene because he hates conflict. And plastered on the side of the bus is delivering happiness, right? But Tony wants what he wants. He wants all of his friends on the bus partying with him. There's also scenes where like this new girl shows up on the bus and like on her first night, they're taking shots, but they're like one person's taking a shot and then spitting it into the next person's mouth.
Oh my God, that's
next person's mouth.
disgusting.
It's like 7 down. It's like again, what's the point? You're not even drinking the shot. Yeah. So like stuff like that, right? And Tony's like, yeah, Tony's drinking is becoming really apparent to his friends, especially his older friends who hadn't seen him in a while. When they'd come to visit him in Vegas, he's always ordering rounds of shots. They didn't necessarily think that was a big deal, but, he's clearly successful. It's obviously not hindering his ability to do work. He's famous, he's really into drinking Fernet. Let us know if you've ever had Fernet, what you think. So this is one thing that his friends are starting to notice is Tony is rarely surrounded by the same group of people for more than a couple hours. No one could really get a sense of how much he was drinking at any given moment.
That is pretty typical behavior of somebody. I can speak from some experience saying that, you would drink with some people to start a night and then drink with other people to end a night. People who drank like you and people who were able to keep up with you. It's also to limit the amount of visibility people have to how much you're drinking, right? It's pretty typical behavior within alcoholism from my experience.
At this point in 2013, he's planning the Las Vegas Life is Beautiful festival with this guy, Rayhan Chaudhry. They are hungover after a bender, and Rayhan asks him, how do you keep up with this drinking? And Tony says, at some point along the way, I stopped getting hangovers. I think that might be the first sign of being an alcoholic. I'm going to leave you on that cliffhanger while we move the story along a little bit to cover what happens next to Tony in Vegas. So corporate gossip number 5 is taking advantage of people who try to change the world. So Tony is constantly moving from project to project. He's almost manic. Okay, this is something we've seen a lot from other CEOs. They love the idea phase. They love brainstorming. They love visioning. They love how people get excited to talk to them about ideas. But once they get to execution and once they get some roadblocks in the way, they kind of get bored and they move along. And they leave the rest of the team that was built around this initial idea standing around with no leadership. A lot of the time, they have enough money. There are enough resources and enough, leftover hype to avoid too much negative press and negative impacts of something like when they bail. But a lot of times the people who work for them or the people to whom promises were made are totally betrayed. And unfortunately for the project I'm about to describe, it also ended with a terribly tragic situation. So I'm about to talk about the Downtown Project, and this was Tony spending $350 million to spruce up a pretty neglected area in downtown Las Vegas. So this isn't the Strip. This is where actual Las Vegans hang out.
You been to Vegas?
Once. By myself.
It's depressing.
It was depressing, but I did see a really good Cirque du Soleil, the Beatles Cirque du Soleil.
Okay.
Sober.
Yeah, nice.
You?
I've been to Vegas a few times, done the Strip. I always try and go. I've been to Old Vegas too, which was fun, but I've never been to outside. I would have loved to go to Henderson because I've heard it's growing like crazy.
Yeah.
It was one of those pandemic boom towns. Yeah, I'd love to get to downtown Vegas and just check it out.
Yeah. Let us know. Hopefully we have some Las Vegas listeners who can have some maybe personal insight into this neighborhood and this project. Downtown Las Vegas, he's trying to rehab it. He's encouraging all of his friends in Silicon Valley, come out to Las Vegas, start your startup here. He gets Andrew Yang to have a bunch of Venture for America fellows go out to Las Vegas to work on the Downtown Project and work in the startups that are being incubated in this area. Venture for America is a nonprofit that was founded by Andrew Yang that basically sent college students out to work for, different startups. I know somebody who did it in New Orleans. It's kind of like Teach for America, but it was shuttered, I think, in 2024. His goal was to kind of create a city that would increase the number of random collisions between interesting people. So this is from the book, quote, Tony introduced rules that would force people to intermingle within the community. Even though there's plenty of parking inside these office buildings, we're actually requiring new tenants to park a couple blocks away so they'd have to crisscross the city. So we're prioritizing collisions over convenience. As the New York Times write, he's making his own little Sim City. He even had the metric return on community and tracked things like collisionable hours. It was called at the time the Great American Techtopia. Tony described it as Ted meets South by Southwest meets Burning Man. So it's a
Three awful things.
It's a certain type of vibe, okay, that you're trying to create here. It's like if we said Meadow Lane X Acme X employees only. And if you know, you know.
Throwing a Jackson Bond in there.
Sure. It's a certain type of lifestyle you might be interested in if you want to live here, right? And he goes, and the best part is we can scale to multiple cities. I'll just give you a vibe of what it looked like. So here's the town center called Container Park. And when he brought out a bunch of shipping containers, I'll say shipping containers at the time were incredibly popular. There was this whole movement of people who would live in shipping containers. There was a whole show on HGTV about it. But this is Container Park. Looks great.
It does look nice.
Tony famously loved fire, and he had a giant praying mantis that was originally set up in Burning Man, moved out to Container Park, and like fire would shoot out of its little antennas. Like, that's fun. There were people who worked at the downtown project, like I said, through Venture for America. And there were people who like opened restaurants there. Again, a lot of this was funded. I think he spent $50 million just on investing in businesses that moved to downtown Las Vegas. And for a while it worked. He's gotten a lot of people to come to this formerly abandoned area. People are like, oh, this is kind of a vibe now. It was pretty nicely revitalized. But the project itself had a year of really unimaginable tragedy. Trigger warning. Between January 2013 and May 2014, 3 prominent entrepreneurs involved in the downtown project, one of whom was a young Venture for America fellow, died by suicide. Okay, this is from Vox. We're going to talk about the Venture for America fellow, whose name was Ovik Banerjee. Ovik Banerjee had been hired by Hsieh without being given a specific job. He worked first for Hsieh's cousin, Hsieh, at the 9th Bridge School, which focuses on entrepreneurship and starts at age 6 weeks.
Oh, 6 weeks.
I love the idea of teaching entrepreneurs
Abacus.
to a 6-week-old.
FP&A.
Yeah, why don't you sell mommy's breast milk at daycare?
Yeah.
So then he was moved to the downtown construction zone and the learning village, where his friends told a reporter that he was asked to mislead city officials about the nature of the project, skirting zoning codes and the permit process by claiming a permanent structure was temporary. Doing this upset him deeply, a source told the reporter. So once Ovik died, the downtown project acknowledged his death in a Facebook post, but nobody, including Tony, did anything to bring the community together to process this death. I mean, this is a pretty small community that's literally growing out of nowhere. They were basically told they could go to the doctor in the downtown project who could refer them to a therapist, but they'd have to pay for it out of their own pockets. And remember, there were a lot of people who cared a lot about the community that they were building. And there were people who worked in the downtown project who wanted to address this issue. They came up with different proposals. They went to Tony and they said, listen, this is a proposal where we can really improve the mental health of the people that live and work here. It'll cost $1 million. And Tony said, no, it's too expensive. I'm not doing it. 4 months after that, a third suicide. The reporter from Vox goes to Las Vegas to get a comment from Tony, and here's what he says, quote, suicides happen anywhere. Look at the stats. Quote, it's harder for people who are really good students in school, then they move into this where there's no instruction manual and you have to be a MacGyver on your own. When people heard this in the community, everyone's jaw just completely dropped. This is a guy who talks about community and he talks about inclusion. And then for 3 people in a row to die by suicide, and that's what you say? You just say it happens? What do you think's going on in his head right now?
There's a real lack of empathy, based on what we know about what was happening at the time. He was probably very stressed. He's dealing with the Zappos stuff. He's dealing with the downtown project. His reputation is on the line. He has no coping mechanisms.
Yeah, he has no. That's exact. I actually don't think he's processing this 1%. I think he is. Anytime he starts to go there and think about it, he probably drinks himself to sleep.
The other thing is, I just don't think, in the interviews I saw with him, I don't think he interviews that well.
No, that's a very good point either. He's not. He's
He needs a handler.
Yeah.
Like he's very awkward. He's evasive.
Well, you got to think too. I wonder if it's because he's doing those interviews relatively sober.
Yeah, and you're right. And yes, absolutely. And now that I think back and look at that picture with all those founders and Tony, it's almost like there was some social interaction that happened there that Tony moved over in that picture. And all those guys were super close. Like, it's like they were all in on the conversation and Tony was not.
Left out.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, even as an adult, even though you're famous, even though you're in that picture, even though you're a billionaire, like, you're still going to be left out in social scenarios. And, like, that's so sad. Going back to the death by suicide, Ovik's father said that Tony had failed in a personal responsibility to maintain the welfare of my oldest son. When Tony said nothing about the death, Ovik's father said, "With your silence, you've compounded that failure." Ovik's father actually ended up dying 4 years later of a heart attack. Ovik's brother said, "My brother was smart, driven, bushy-tailed, bright-eyed, 20-something-year-old coming into a place trying to make it better. I don't blame Tony Hsieh or the Downtown Project, but I do blame the broader system that takes advantage of people who try to change the world." That's so sad. So yeah, I mean, now Tony is drifting from the Downtown Project. There are layoffs and everybody's looking around like, what the fuck? We moved here for you. We gave up lives and money and, you know, we had this dream with you and now you're leaving us. The reporters at the Las Vegas Review-Journal were not kind. Here's a quote. "Hsieh washed his hand of the Downtown Project recently and has upper management handling the layoffs." The article said bad management and broken promises at the Downtown Project eroded public trust. Oh, God, here's another Las Vegas Review-Journal article that said, "The cult of Tony Hsieh developed a crack this past weekend, and that's a good thing." Hsieh's true believers who bought into his rhetoric like kids waiting to sit on Santa's lap.
Here's the other thing I wonder at this point. Where's Amazon? Aren't they worried at all about their investment with Tony Hsieh he is CEO of Zappos. He's got this Downtown Project stuff going on. They're not blind. They know what's happening. Why aren't they doing a temperature check, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. And keep in mind, it is 2013. Tony Hsieh does not retire from Zappos as the CEO until 2020. Just keep that in mind. It's not going to get better from here. A source commented blaming the layoffs at the Downtown Project on bad hiring practices. I thought this was a very interesting quote. "Tony is not always the most wise judge of character. There's a lot of family. There's a lot of drinking buddies that were hired at the Downtown Project. Poor choices were made." I mean, this is such an ego death for Tony. And I think it's really the first time he's being criticized, not just from outsiders, but also from people who had expressly bought into Tony's vision. And again, because you don't have the financial backing of a company that's doing hockey stick growth, it's a lot easier for people to shit on you.
So now think about this. A guy who gets all of his security through external validation is now getting all of this awful, awful media. This, to me, is the fulcrum of the story.
Yeah, it's like the turning point.
Yeah.
Total turning point. I mean, I completely agree with you. It's hard to be light for this specific episode, and I think especially from here on out, just like kind of brace yourselves. But side note, Container Park still exists. You can go there. Looks fun. I did click a little bit on Reddit, and it seems like overall Las Vegans are pretty happy with the work that Tony did there. Although a lot of people say like it wasn't effective city planning. Like there's a tried and true city planning process, and you can't necessarily build a city like you can build a startup. I think a lot of CEOs, especially Silicon Valley CEOs, like to endeavor in city planning, and it doesn't always work out. And I think this is one that maybe worked out a little bit. Here's the truth. Your biggest opportunities don't come from job boards. They come from people. A random lunch, a weak tie, a DM from someone you forgot you even met. Enter Goodword, your networking co-pilot. It organizes your people, tracks who you want to stay close to, and reminds you to follow up at just the right moment. Founders use it. Operators use it. People with juicy corporate tea definitely use it. And because you're a Corporate Gossip listener, you get exclusive early access. Go to goodword.com/gossip. That's GOODWORD.com/gossip. Or click the link in our show notes, because your next big break or your next unbelievable story probably starts with somebody already in your network. Good Word, just make sure you actually remember their name. So you ready for Corporate Gossip number 6?
Sure.
The lost souls leading the lost souls. So a lot of the CEOs we've met on this podcast enjoy world building. We talk about Les Wexner. I went into business so I could create my own little world, right? They don't like the inconveniences or anxieties or moments of pain that normal human beings have to experience when living everyday life. So they use their money to create a different world to surround themselves with different rules and different norms. And to do this, you need both money and you need influence. Tony had both. I think the press had kind of turned on Tony, but still, he had a good amount of people who believed in him and certainly were willing to live next to him and be in his orbit still. If you think about Tony's life as The Sims, I kind of imagine us like clicking on the home button and then like transferring neighborhoods. So you're leaving the downtown project and you're clicking into a place called Airstream Park. So here's a video of, this is ABC News, who's going to visit Tony Hsieh at Airstream Park.
What was kind of the vision here?
Originally, I guess the thought was, let's try to co-create a urban version of Burning Man. It's all friends and friends of friends, and that's definitely part of what I liked about the Burning Man environment.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's just fun being able to try to recreate that in an urban environment.
Now we're in November 2014. Tony's living in the park with his closest friends. Quote, every Airstream trailer and tiny home open towards the center of a lot, a common living room, with AstroTurf carpeting the concrete where people set up camping chairs, tables, and fire pit. To complete the space, a large outdoor screen was set up for movie nights. I totally get this. As somebody who has lived in a trailer park, Mike and I used to have a seasonal camper up at a trailer park. It fucking rips so hard. It's like the communal living that you dream about. I think like everybody should live in a trailer at some point, because it really is like a great sense of community. I mean, you've been there before. Everybody, you kind of just like set up a fire and people walk by and, you know, hey, can I borrow stuff? Do you want to come over for dinner? It's like, it really is like college. It's the closest thing that I've experienced to college since being an adult. But of course, in my trailer park experience, there are not as many drugs or partying.
Well, there is partying.
There is partying. No drugs.
There is partying. There's
a lot of Miller Lights.
There's lots of Miller Lights, lots of Busch Lights, and lots of cornhole.
Oh, they had to put rules and regulations in. You can't play cornhole at my trailer park past 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Or you're going to get
kicked out.
Tony's Airstream Park, he invited people to come in. He sent out an email to people saying, hey, everybody, I want us to endeavor in a social living experiment. Come on down to Vegas, live with me in a trailer park. And if you or I sent out that email to people, I don't think anyone would show up to our Airstream Park in Vegas. But when Tony does, it's a totally different story, right? He has a lot of loyal friends. Quote, a lot of us used to say that Tony collected lost souls. He would bring them into his world, treat them really well, and they would become fiercely loyal to him. In order to get an invite to his 40th birthday party, you had to get a tattoo, a small circle representing a pixel. It's an intense display of loyalty. Getting inked for a boss generally isn't part of corporate culture, and it exemplifies the concerns some Las Vegans have about Hsieh. That was, again, the Las Vegas Sun. There were older friends around Tony at this time who noticed that at this point, he's only being surrounded by yes men. Like, if you're only letting people come to your birthday party who are willing to get permanent ink for you, you're setting the bar pretty high. And being surrounded by yes men is dangerous, certainly from a business perspective, but it even is more dangerous when you consider drugs and alcohol from like a personal safety perspective. And if we move forward towards 2018, friends are starting to notice that Tony's eyes are getting really jaundiced, which is a sign of alcoholic hepatitis. His hands are starting to shake during morning meetings at Zappos.
Those would be the DTs.
Mm-hmm. Assistants start serving mimosas at meetings at Zappos.
Hair of the dog.
And he's taking part, obviously. One coworker notices that he has never seen a day when Tony wasn't drinking. And around this time, Tony goes to Burning Man and is introduced for the first time to ketamine. We've covered ketamine in a couple episodes. I think the last time we talked about it was like 23andMe, because Elon Musk does a lot of ketamine. It's a dissociative anesthetic that sometimes has hallucinogenic effects. It's a horse tranquilizer. It's now becoming a lot more popular.
It's mainstream.
Pretty mainstream. It's featured on The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives last season. Tony becomes really into ketamine, and he's really open about it. He's at a Silicon Valley conference, and he goes around telling people, like, since I've been on ketamine, I respond to things differently. I'm a super genius. I have complete control. I can do things other can't. I can download Taekwondo and instantly be a master of it, which I think is from The Matrix.
That is a direct plot point from The Matrix.
And that's what he's doing in public in front of colleagues. Back at Airstream Park, things are getting extremely bizarre. Quote, he was acting in a manic manner, appearing shirtless and shoeless in the frigid air, pacing around trailers and tiny homes and ranting about new strange ideas. He wanted to start a new religion. He was working towards unlocking the escape combination to the universe. When people asked Tony why he was acting so strangely, he told them it was method acting. He started treating his friends in a way that was alarming and cruel. He gave friends strikes for interrupting him. He continues to pressure them to do ketamine with him. When friends told him that they were concerned, he offered them half his net worth if they would sign a pact never to question him.
Mm-hmm.
Tony's in a full-blown drug-induced psychosis, and no one around him is stopping it. You might be thinking, like, what the fuck? If I was there, I would have said something. But there's, like, a psychological phenomenon going on here. There's a little bit of groupthink, authority bias, like, this guy brought us all here. Like, he must know what he's doing. Social conformity, if they're not doing it, well, I'm not going to be the one to say no. Plus the fact that, like, he's bankrolling a lot of these people. He's investing in their projects. And I know what happens if I start to express concern, he's going to cut me out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole line of people outside this Airstream Park who want to come in. If I leave, someone else is just going to take my spot, right? Over at Zappos, we're moving towards 2019. Top executives are starting to get concerned. And you, in this story, first started to exhibit concern in 2013. We're moving ahead 6 years in the story.
Which means they had been covering for him for 6 years.
Despite the fact that they were getting daily updates at the time, they still weren't willing to remove Tony from his position. Remember, Tony is still the face of Zappos.
This is exactly the Sumner Redstone story, right?
Right? It's so funny that you say that because I wrote that here. The guy is completely incapacitated, but you'll still hold him up and put Ramona Singer glasses on his eyes to make him look lifelike so you can protect your brand. But at this point, like in the Sumner Redstone story, at this point, he's on a feeding tube. He's not able to cogently speak. He's breathing into a speakerphone at the board meeting. In Tony's situation, he's taking 3 to 5 grams of ketamine a day, which I was like, I don't know how much the normal recreational dose is. I went to drugs.com. I assume drugs.com is a reputable source, but they say that a recreational dose of ketamine is between 200 and 300 milligrams. So 3 to 5 grams is at a minimum 10 times the recreational dose of ketamine a day.
Yeah, that's how the metric system works.
And he is the CEO of Zappos.
The CEO of Tesla is also doing things like that.
You guys, again, just remember, the internal corporate comms at Zappos is still covering for this guy. There are executives who are sending memos to Tony Hsieh for his sign-off. So I want you to remember when you're feeling like, God, I'm not as smart as the CEO. What am I doing? Remember, there's an entire operation of corporate comms that is holding these men up, sometimes with their fist, like literally inside their body, like a hand puppet, to make them look good. So don't feel bad about yourself, okay? If you had an entire corporate comms department dedicated to making you look good, I'm sure you'd look smart too, okay? At some point in early 2020, a bunch of friends get together and tell Tony, like, you need to leave Airstream Park. Like, this is getting really bad. Because he's in the middle of downtown Las Vegas. Like, people can encounter him, and it's getting really, really bad. They're trying to plan an intervention, and they're like, maybe at least if you leave this environment, we might have a better shot to get you into rehab. They're like, you love Park City. You're in the middle of the nature. Here's his house in Park City. It's a lot different from Airstream Park. It's just one house in the middle of the woods, right? So I'm also thinking that they're like, we can't risk having anybody see you in this state.
Right.
They go to Park City, Utah. Early in his trip to Park City, he goes to Sundance. He's hanging out with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I guess Zappos and JGL were working on a project together. Interestingly, JGL also showed up in our Sam Altman episode because his wife is on the board of OpenAI. She was on the board of OpenAI. She was fired after the whole Sam Altman firing thing. But it's weird. Small circles. So eventually they get Tony to rehab, but he checks himself out after 2 weeks. His friends on their way to rehab, I have a document here that was given. I think this is like given to the doctor at rehab, but these are a few of the things they noticed. He said he could run a 3-hour marathon without training, that he could grow his height so that he was 7 foot tall. He's telling people, I'm not mad at you, because if I were mad at you, it would be like being mad at the dog. He said he didn't have to pee anymore, that his body could recycle urine. Said he could manifest things like create water from a spigot. Said he could solve and cure COVID, could solve world peace. He was interpretive dancing. He was pretending like he was inside movies, barely slept, forgot things, had no memory, reckless, fearless, open drug use, giving everyone a book about ketamine and openly talking about it, putting people on timeout for lowering energy flow. Physical appearance was suffering, weight loss, bruising, hollow eyes, pulled muscles, clearly in pain, blank stares, blank looks, no energy.
So I would make the argument, based on that list, that isolating Tony was not the best move. Especially knowing now that we were going into COVID, and he would just be further isolated with a group of people who are mooching off of him.
I think it's a good point. I mean, Tony's family does show up at Park City. They're really concerned about him. He sits down with his mom and he's like, I will talk to you as long as you're my friend and you never question me. His family leaves, but his younger brother, Andy, stays around. Now, I want to talk about Andy just really briefly. Andy worked at Zappos. So did his brother, Dave. Dave was actually laid off from Zappos in 2008. And like he says, he's like, I don't mind the layoff, but Tony actually never talked to me about the fact that I was laid off. And that really hurt my feelings. Andy was actually fired from Zappos because he was a poor culture fit, they said. A lot of people said that he like kind of skated and like rested on the fact that he was a Hsieh. He actually went out to develop his own startup called Lux Deluxe, which was kind of like, remember Billy McFarland's millennial credit card? It was like a way to get you into like exclusive events. Okay. It was kind of like that. He got investments from his dad, from his mom, from his other brother, but Tony didn't invest. A lot of people who were involved in the project were like, I don't know why he's doing this. He's like certainly spending a lot of money. He's taking a lot of private jets. He's spending money on launch parties, but like it's not clear that he has any vision for this startup other than I want to do a startup like my brother and prove that I'm just as good as he is. It folded. After Andy goes with his family to visit Tony in Park City, he's like, Mom, I think it's a good idea if I stay here with Tony. I can keep an eye on him, and my friend, also named Tony Lee, is going to come with me, and like maybe we can work on a project together while we're here, and we can keep an eye on Tony. And Tony's a financial planner, and so we'll watch his finances for him. And Mom's like, okay, all right, that sounds good. Once Andy gets there, and I bring up Tony Lee because he's going to play a big part in the after show as well. So just keep that in mind, okay? So Andy sticks around, and Andy quickly realizes that, quote, he'd entered an ecosystem where people were competing for Tony's money, pitching projects that didn't make sense, and living in houses they would never be able to afford. And there was a rule that ominously dictated many behaviors in the Park City enclave. Never tell Tony you were concerned about his behavior. To do so meant risking excommunication. Do you have any insight into the psychology of telling people, like, if you tell me that what I'm doing is wrong or that, like, my behavior is concerning
No,
to you?
this would only be something that would happen if you had the means to make people
Oh, interesting.
to make people leave you. Normally, what you should do with an addict is be like, all right, well, I'm not going to support you. I'm not going to stand by and watch you. You just are going to I'm relieving all contact, and you figure it out on your own. Tony's the opposite.
He wasn't able to hit rock bottom.
There's no rock bottom.
The Zappos team shows up at Park City. This is February or March 2020. Tony is out of rehab, still Zappos CEO. He's got them all sitting around the table, and he's like, guys, I have a new proposal. We need to achieve company-wide flow state. To do this, let's delete our organizational calendars. And instead, if everybody's in the same flow state, then they would just know where to be and when to join meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Being so generous, if you do listen to enough of these Silicon Valley guys, like the line between kooky, holistic, Burning Man adjacent ideas and like thoughts that stem from drug-induced psychosis can be pretty blurry. It's crazy to me that still nobody cut the brakes at Zappos and said, like, where is the board of directors? The chief legal officer ends up moving into Tony's house, drinking with him, yucking it up. The executives have seen with their own eyes at this point what is going on. 2 Zappos executives, along with Tony and some other friends, get on a pontoon boat in the Deer Creek Reservoir in Park City. Tony says, guys, we got to get on the boat because I need us to get all on the same flow state. So they all get on the boat and, quote, as soon as the land begins to recede behind them, the calm was interrupted by a disturbing storm in the form of Tony. Something changed in Tony's demeanor, as if a switch had been flicked. Tony had a Sharpie in his hand and was scribbling what appeared to be Egyptian hieroglyphs on his arm and torso. Others turned their heads to steal a glance at him before averting their eyes. The more furiously he dragged the marker over his body, the more he began muttering to himself. He flinched and tightened his jaw. Some heard him spitting the words, flow state. He lurched up, snatched a blanket, climbed to the upper deck. Everyone watched in silence as he curled up in a fetal position and pulled the blanket over him. His mumbling continued, sometimes breaking out into incoherent shouts. The words flow state kept coming. He gets back to the house and he tells one of the people on the boat, hey, can you let everybody know I was just acting? In case they were wondering why I was acting like that. I was method acting.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says to that person, he goes, please don't question me. If you don't question me again, I'll give you half my net worth.
Right.
Ugh. Zappos executives are on the boat. Things start to further deteriorate. Tony ends up suggesting everybody go to Montana on a bus trip. They got on the bus. They're on their way to Montana. Tony's doing tons of mushrooms. He says, I'll be able to solve COVID if he just has more mushrooms. He's in the bus bathroom. He's covered in feces in an effort to reabsorb minerals.
Right.
What do you think, like, again, is it even ethical to be sharing these details? Like, now that this person is gone, I don't know. What's like the ethical?
I don't know.
Like, that's so.
Well.
Is it, like, I kind of feel bad sharing this. I mean, it was in the book, but I'm also
like. Yeah,
I
think it's look. These are the warning signs that happen when somebody has power, influence, and addiction. Like, this is where it leads, and like, how are we to learn if not to speak these stories? And like, it's not for us. We report the news. I
know. I'm just saying, like, I don't know. Is it ethical? I'm feeling uncomfortable, like, sharing this. I mean, I didn't report it myself, but there's also a part of me that's like, God, this was a human being. This was somebody's son, somebody's friend, and like, I don't know. It's just heartbreaking. It's just really, really heartbreaking. He ends up asking friends to join him on the bus in a suicide pact, saying that dying was the best way to transcend human consciousness. They take him to a hospital, but he releases himself. There are a lot of instances also where like the cops are called, but then maybe they're paid off by Tony. Like there's a lot of times where he is like very close to proper help, but then he gets away with it. And I think it goes back to your point of like there is no rock bottom when you're really rich and powerful.
Yeah, when you're really rich and powerful. Like otherwise he would be, there would be an
involuntary,
well, there would be homelessness or involuntary commitment, right? Or jail, like they say jails, institutions, or death. He would have ended up in jail or an institution if he didn't have the money and the people behind him, right? He has got a lawyer on speed dial that he can pay that's retained, actually.
Yeah. Back at the Park City house, after he leaves hospital, after the Montana bus trip is abandoned, he's inviting even more new people to come with him. Again, he's still Tony Hsieh. He's got name recognition. He can literally tweet and like 50 people will be at his door the next day. He's promising them millions of dollars for projects. He's giving them hundreds of $1,000s in salary. He's hiring court reporters to transcribe every conversation he has. And then he discovers whippets. And so whippets are another form of nitrous oxide. And if you've ever been at the dentist, it's like what do they call it? Laughing gas at the dentist. Okay, corporate gossip number 8, from bad to worst. So it just goes downhill fast from here. I don't know. I was going to include a couple pictures, but you could Google them yourself. I'm not going to put them on the Substack because they're just very disturbing. He invites people to Park City who are nitrous oxide evangelists. He did the same thing with ketamine, where I think it's like a way to justify his behavior. He's like, look, all these people are experts. And he has his assistant make videos about the nitrous oxide advantage to like say, look, you guys should do it with me. It's really not that bad. People who show up continue to pitch him business. He seemed willing to spend himself broke. He became obsessed with the number 10 and he was like, I want to 10x my life. And he tells people, I want you to invest in all different types of businesses like ventures, real estate. He invests $1.8 million on funding a Paula Abdul residency at a local music venue in Las Vegas, in Park City. And he tells his assistants and his lawyers and his financial managers, for every deal you bring me, you get a 10% commission.
And it doesn't matter the deal. It could be a dog shit deal. As long as you're spending my money, you get 10% of it.
So like buy me a property worth $1 million, you get $100,000. Mimi Pham managed a contractor that charged Tony $83,000 a month. So she's getting $8,300 a month.
Right.
She bought him a fleet of buses for $3.7 million. She gets $370,000. Now, there's a huge question about all these contracts that he's signing. Is he even does he have the mental faculties to even sign a contract? You know, like if somebody gets you drunk and then has you sign a contract that says like, I own your house now, that contract is null and void. And so there's a big question we'll talk about on the after show is like all these contracts he signed, where do they stand now? Given that we know about his mental state. Somewhere around this time, he's taking 50 cartridges of nitrous oxide a day, often in public. And this is August 2020. It's only now that he retires from Zappos. And if you went to Inc. magazine at the time, I found the article announcing his retirement. It just says, Tony Hsieh is leaving Zappos after 20 years, but he'll still deliver happiness. It just says, August 24th, its Firebrand CEO of 2 decades would depart the company effective immediately. No other details. Okay, this is the part of the story where Jewel shows up. Remember Jewel?
The singer.
So in September, Jewel had been friends with Tony over the past couple of years, but she's actually one of the only people who is probably as wealthy and powerful as he is.
Well, I don't know if Jewel has Tony Hsieh money, but Jewel's got money.
She's got money. She's got her own life.
She's definitely powerful.
She doesn't need Tony in any way. She's got her own life, right? She shows up to Tony's house and she's like, holy fucking shit. She's looking around the house, filth, drugs. She became convinced that Tony was going to die if he stayed there on this path. She concludes that there seemed to be no one in Tony's current orbit aware of his fate, or if they were aware, then they were willingly enabling his demise and being paid for it. She sees Tony. She's like, you're going to die, dude. She sends a letter to him. And I'm just going to read you some highlights, but I'll link the full letter in the show notes. She says, when you look around and realize that every single person around you is on your payroll, you're in trouble. You are rambling and not making sense, but you think you are. I need to be clear. You sound like a crazy person when you're talking and no one seems to be telling you. It's sad, and I don't think it's your time to die. Tony gets the letter. He reads it out loud to all of his friends, and he's like, gives it to one of his assistants, and he's like, can you please post this to Facebook? And despite all the times that people have said yes to him in the past, for some reason, this time his assistant says no. And that was kind of glossed over in the book, but to me, I'm like, that was a fucking cry for help.
That was his cry for help, yeah. That was it.
In October, Tony has one of his lawyers draw up a contract, and he buys the Zappos building for $70 million, $30 million over asking. 9 days after that transaction was closed, Tony is taken to the emergency room after stating that he believed he was becoming a crystal. He believed he was in a simulation, that he had been chewing cigarettes, and professing, I don't know what's real and what's not. He would live for 16 more days. Okay, so this is the end. It's crazy. Like, at the end of this story, I mean, it just feels so, like, rote and inevitable, and like when you put it in the context with the rest of the story, it's just obvious what's going to happen, you know? The last part starts with the death of Tony's dog, Blizzy, which I'm not going to get into. I don't know. What was described was they left out a lot of details, and I don't really want to know more details. I'm going to just leave it there. But that is devastating for him. The group ends up going to a New London, Connecticut home owned by one of Tony's assistants for Thanksgiving. Tony is inconsolable after losing his dog. He's doing whippets constantly. There were a few times when fires were started in the home. I had said earlier that Tony loved fire. That's why he had that praying mantis with the fire coming out of its antennas. Like, he still loves fire. He's obsessed with it and was like lighting things on fire. The fire department is called. But when the fire department would show up, the people in the house would be kind of cagey. On November 16th, Tony got in an argument with his assistant who kicked him out of her house. And she's like, I don't care where you go. You can sleep on the fucking beach for all I care. You can get a hotel, but you can't stay here. And he's like, fine, I'm going to go sleep on the beach. But it's November 16th in Connecticut. It's cold. So he ends up going to the shed that's attached to her house. It's like the pool shed. And he covers himself with a blanket. And he starts lighting things on fire to stay warm. A piece of paper, a Ziploc bag. At points, security cameras kind of show him going in and out of the shed. And it's like there's dark smoke coming out of the shed at this point. And he closes the door. You can hear him lock the door. And he locks himself inside. And eventually the fire starts. They call the fire department. They get him out. They bring him to the hospital. He's airlifted. He's taken to the ICU. 9 days after being admitted, he passes away at 46 years old. The reaction at the time, I mean, people were just pouring out like tributes to him. There was billboards everywhere across Vegas. You know, we'll miss you greatly. My takeaways. I was just watching the Eddie Murphy documentary on Netflix last night, and he says when he's like thinking about his rise to fame, he's like, the thing that really protected me as I'm becoming more and more famous is that I loved myself. And that's what helped me survive. Self-love, I think, can feel very foo-foo, and it can feel kind of like almost a luxury. But in many ways, it is one of the best armors you have as you're progressing through life. Like, it helps you make good decisions. It helps you stay grounded to your values. Like, I know what my values are, and I love myself, and I will forgive myself when I make mistakes. And it's not easy to love yourself. It really isn't. And I think the thing that breaks my heart about Tony is like, he was so lovable. Like, everybody who talks about him is like, he was just so much fun to be around and such a lovely guy, and like clearly was just a great friend to people, wanted people to be included. They talk about how like even in the early days at Zappos, like he would be in meetings and he would go up to a new person in the office and be like, hey, we're going to lunch. You want to come with us? Nobody does that. Think about those guys he's in the picture with Microsoft, with all those CEOs and Bill Gates. You think any one of those guys would ask him if he wants to come to lunch with them? I doubt it, you know? And it's like, he was enough in so many ways. And I think that is ultimately like the biggest shame to me. And like, God, he would have made, the other thing I kept thinking, this is like, I think it is apparent to me only in seeing your journey, is he would have made such a good sober person. Is that okay for me to say? What do you think?
What do I think?
I mean, not just in relation to what I said, but just in general.
So they say the opposite of addiction is connection. And when you look at the end of Tony's life, the only thing I think of is like the end of Tony's life. If the pandemic hadn't happened and he hadn't been so isolated and so surrounded by yes people, right, there would have been more people. He would have had more interactions with people, which would have raised more red flags. Like, it might have taken somebody to be like, in Park City, have a camera phone and be like, what the fuck is that Tony shit? What is he doing?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Post
and
it.
that's like, nobody knows what he's doing because it's all under a veil because everyone's so isolated, and he's got all these people who are protecting him, which is not something that most people have who are in active addiction. People are not actively protecting you at the end of your addiction. It's very much the opposite. You are alone, and most of the people who you were close with won't talk to you anymore. And you have no other choice other than, you, and it's just you, and you have that moment of desperation to change your life. There's no desperation for Tony.
Ugh.
He was living in, he purchased $90 million
He had everything he wanted.
in Park City real estate at the last 6 months of his life. So, and he was about to go on they were literally fueling up the private jet to go to Maui the night he died. So, yeah, the lack of desperation is challenging, and the lack of connection.
Yeah. And it's so sad too, because like, I mean, I've never seen a stronger community than a bunch of sober people together, like that's the other sad thing too, is like he's searching for this community, and like he could have had both, and it's sad that he wasn't able to ever experience like, anything else than addiction. And it's just a really, really sad story. Okay. If there was ever time I'm thankful for our good news correspondent, this was one of them. So make sure you listen to the end of the episode for some good news from Elizabeth Liu. I think I will end this episode before we shout out our SBF sugar daddies. I will end this episode by saying something that I used to say at the beginning of most episodes earlier in the season, and I kind of got off saying, but just like, be kind to yourself and be kind to others. Life is tough, and yeah, and I think community is important. So look out for each other. So with that said, do you want to thank our SBF sugar daddies?
I did last time.
Okay, I did it. We have a new one, so I'll leave her for last. Nora, Anastasia, Sarah, Michael, and Kelly. Our SBF sugar daddies are that sustaining level. That's a $25 a month level. You get a shout out on every main feed episode, and you get a special note from us. A little handwritten note, holiday note coming up soon. We thank all of our paying supporters over on patreon.com and all of our listeners. Anybody, if you spend 60 to 90 to 2 hours every other week with us, what an honor that is. And I'm just really grateful for everybody who's listened throughout the seasons, and we will be back in the new year. All right, guys, I think we'll wrap it there. You doing okay, Adam?
Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe just give it. Just people are going to be worried about you.
I'm all right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
This week's good news comes from Arizona and the family-run business Spinato's Pizzeria and Family Kitchen. Ken Spinato first opened the restaurant in Scottsdale in 1974 with his wife Elaine, and today he continues to greet guests and restaurants and remains a steady figure in the business. It's this same love and passion that motivated the Spinato family to give their employees a piece of the pie and transition to an employee stock ownership plan, or an ESOP, which will grant 49% of company ownership to eligible employees. Spinato's currently employs 420 people, and they have 7 locations across Arizona and several concession stands at the State Farm Stadium in Glendale and the Mortgage Matchup Center in downtown Phoenix. The family said a main motivator of the transition was labor challenges, inflationary pressures, and the wage gap. Anthony Spinato, the CEO, said, "I have seen too many great organizations dilute their experience when growing. My message to our team has always been, if we are going to grow and get bigger, we must get better while doing it." Now, as an ESOP, 1 out of 3 Spinato's employees is an owner. An ESOP is an employee benefit plan that provides substantial benefits to the company, its current owners, and its employees. Employees who are 21 years or older and work more than 1,000 hours a year will be eligible for ownership. Every year, the employees will get a report on the value of their shares, and unlike many other companies, Spinato's is also maintaining their 401k plans. Terry Weiberg has been with Spinato's for 24 years and has moved from a dishwasher to the company's food and beverage director. He welcomes the change as well, stating, "The commitment I have felt for decades is matched by ownership. I am proud to say that I am not just an employee anymore. I'm an owner in the very place that has shaped my career and my life." When Becca texted me about the Spinato's story in Arizona, it reminded me of a similar story I had read in Ohio. If you've ever been to Ohio, you've probably heard of Grater's Ice Cream. They have so many locations across Ohio, and they're probably one of the best ice cream places in Ohio. But with the retirement of Bob Grater, the former owner of the company, his stake was bought out and placed in an ESOP trust. Now 44% of Grater's will go out to vested full-time employees. The company stated they were also previously approached by private equity firms, but decided against it because, quote, "Private equity is a financial deal with the devil. It's kind of like selling your soul. PE ruins companies." So for the foreseeable future, Grater's will continue to be family owned. ESOPs only make up 7% of the country's businesses, but small businesses are often the backbone of our community's economy, and it's more important than ever that we support them. I can say for myself, the local coffee shop down the street is a lot better than the Starbucks. So I would encourage you to get out there and support your local small businesses. I can guarantee you that they care a lot more about you, their employees, and not just their bottom line. For the Corporate Gossip Podcast, this has been Elizabeth Liu.